The vast reaches of space were usually filled with chatter, a symphony of frequencies, pulses, and signals from 1,000 sentient civilizations. They crackled, hummed, and danced through the void, carrying everything from mathematical formulas to philosophical debates. Earth's transmission, once one of the loudest, had always been distinctive. An almost chaotic blend of radio waves, television broadcasts, encrypted messages, and curious bursts of data that even the most sophisticated alien decoders found intriguing. But now, there was silence. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. The grand communications nexus of the Arcturian Confederation had monitored Earth's signals for centuries. To the Arcturians, humans were unpredictable but fascinating, wildly inefficient yet somehow brilliant. The humans were still a young species by galactic standards, and their cacophony of transmissions had always been a source of both amusement and bafflement. Earth's output was like an incessant, noisy child in a library of ancient scholars. The day the signals stopped, Administrator Jelan's antennae twitched in irritation. "Status report," Jelan barked, the vibrations from his vocal membranes rippling through the dense atmosphere of the control chamber. His subordinate, a pale, multi-eyed being named Cyril, flinched. "All monitoring stations confirm the same readings," Cyril replied, her voice clicking nervously. "The Earth's electromagnetic output has dropped to 0. No transmissions detected in any spectrum." Jelan's eyes narrowed, the black pupils dilating in disbelief. "That's impossible. Even primitive systems malfunction occasionally, but they don't just vanish." The control room was already in a state of organized chaos. Screens flickered with incomprehensible streams of data, holograms displaying Earth's position among the stars, and rows of analysts frantically attempting to re-establish contact. The room was filled with beings from countless star systems, long-limbed, gelatinous, insectoid, and even crystalline, all united in their obsession with observing Earth. "Could it be an atmospheric interference?" another voice asked, belonging to the spherical entity hovering near the control console. Its tendrils pulsed with curious light. "Perhaps a natural disaster?" "Unlikely," Cyril responded, shaking her head. "Even during their worst planetary upheavals, the humans kept broadcasting. Their species is relentless, like a virus." Jelan turned toward the main screen, where the last known images of Earth flickered, captured by one of their long-range probes. The blue-green planet seemed as serene as ever, spinning slowly on its axis, its vast oceans shimmering under its yellow sun. "No," Jelan said slowly. "This is something deliberate." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. On the far side of the galaxy, in a different sector entirely, the Council of the 12 convened in urgent session. The council was composed of representatives from the most powerful empires in the known universe, each one responsible for monitoring and, if necessary, intervening in the affairs of younger species. "I've seen this before," declared Vishra, a being whose body was a swirling mass of luminescent gas. "The sudden cessation of signals is usually a precursor to some form of extinction-level event." "Are you suggesting the humans have destroyed themselves?" rumbled Grittalak, a hulking creature with a carapace like molten rock. He leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Good riddance. Their endless chatter was giving half my researchers migraines." "Possibly," Vishra conceded, "but Earth is unpredictable." A murmur of agreement rippled through the council. Earth had survived countless self-inflicted catastrophes before. Wars, environmental collapse, biological plagues. And yet, the humans always found a way to bounce back, louder and more chaotic than ever. Councillor Ilrix, whose mechanical body hummed with cybernetic enhancements, interjected. Their technology was primitive but evolving rapidly. A complete blackout suggests something beyond their capability. Perhaps an external threat. "A new species?" someone muttered. "A hostile takeover? Or..." Vishra paused, her gaseous form flickering ominously. "Something far worse." Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. On a derelict space station orbiting the remains of a collapsed star, Captain Arlo Chambers was staring at the last transmission Earth had ever sent. The station was the final outpost of humanity's deep space explorers, a ragtag group of scientists, engineers, and misfits who had left Earth decades ago in search of something, anything, to bring back to their dying planet. The signal had come through faint and garbled, but Arlo could still hear the desperation in the message. "This is Earth Command," a voice crackled, distorted by static. "To all deep space vessels, do not return. Repeat, do not return. We are compromised." The message had ended there, cutting off into a harsh, metallic screech that sent chills down his spine. For weeks, they had tried to re-establish contact, but there was nothing. No response from Earth, no signals from their lunar colonies, not even the usual background noise of digital data leaking from the planet's satellites. "They're really gone," whispered Lieutenant Ruiz, who stood beside Arlo in the dimly lit command center. Her eyes were wide, her face pale. "We're alone." Arlo clenched his fists, trying to suppress the gnawing dread. He knew what Ruiz was thinking, what they were all thinking. If Earth had fallen silent, that meant whatever had happened was far beyond the comprehension of their fragile human minds. And it was coming for them next. "Send a message to the Arcturian Confederation," Arlo ordered, his voice steady despite the panic in his gut. "If anyone can help us figure out what's going on, it's them." But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was already too late. Somehow, in the vast silence that now enveloped Earth, the humans had disappeared, leaving only questions and a sense of impending doom. And as the stars outside the station's viewport gleamed coldly, Captain Chambers wondered if this was just the beginning. Hours passed in tense silence as Captain Chambers and his crew waited for a response from the Arcturian Confederation. The small outpost, barely clinging to life on the edge of a dead system, was now humanity's only connection to the wider galaxy. And right now, that connection was fraying. Lieutenant Ruiz was at the communications console, her hands hovering nervously over the controls. The air in the station felt thin, oppressive, as though even the station itself sensed the dark uncertainty that had descended over them. Finally, the console crackled. A signal, small, faint, and burdened with distortion, began to filter through. "Attention, human vessel, this is Administrator Gillen of the Arcturian Confederation. We received your message." A sharp voice clicked through the speakers, the words laced with a hint of impatience. "Your homeworld's silence is of great concern. We are dispatching a team of specialists to your location for further analysis." Arlo leaned forward, gripping the console. "Administrator Gillen, this is Captain Arlo Chambers. We need to know, have you seen anything like this before? Could it be some kind of natural phenomenon?" Jaylan's sigh was audible, even over the static. "Natural? No. I fear the situation may be far from natural. In our experience, sudden silence often indicates an external force. However, the lack of any transmission, no distress call, no automated systems, is highly unusual, even for extreme events." There was a pause, and Jaylan's voice grew colder. "Captain, you must prepare yourselves for the worst." The line went silent, leaving Arlo and Ruiz staring at each other, the weight of those words settling over them like a heavy fog. The worst? Arlo had seen plenty of humanity's worst. War, famine, even mass extinction from climate collapse back on Earth. But this was something else. The silence from Earth felt almost sentient, like a void reaching out through the cosmos. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. On the Council of the Twelve's homeworld, a gleaming metallic structure loomed over a sprawling alien city. The building, known as the Vault of Knowledge, housed the most comprehensive repository of galactic history and information. Its vast libraries were filled with everything from ancient artifacts to recordings of long-forgotten species. Inside one of its cold, echoing chambers, Councillor Ilrix and Vishra floated before a massive holographic display, its bluish light casting eerie shadows on their faces. They'd been combing through centuries of recorded data, searching for anything that might explain Earth's sudden disappearance. "Look here," Vishra murmured, pointing to a faint pattern in a spectral analysis chart. "There are traces of an anomalous energy signature surrounding the solar system. It's faint, almost imperceptible, but it's there." Ilrix's eyes flickered. "This is ancient, older than any known civilization, even older than our own records." Vishra nodded, her gaseous form swirling with shades of violet and blue. "There are only a handful of cases recorded, and each one tells the same story. Sudden, unexplainable silence, as if these planets had been erased." The two exchanged a look, their unease growing. For beings as advanced and knowledgeable as they were, the idea of something older, something inexplicable by their standards, was deeply unsettling. "So, what are we dealing with?" Ilrix asked quietly. Vishra's gaze drifted back to the hologram. "I believe this energy may be a remnant of the oldest known entities in the galaxy, the so-called architects. Legends claim they once roamed freely, shaping worlds and life as they pleased, until they simply vanished. If this is their doing, then we may be dealing with something that defies understanding." "But why Earth?" Ilrix pressed. "What could they possibly want with such a primitive world?" Vishra's answer was barely a whisper. Perhaps it wasn't Earth they wanted. Perhaps it was us. Back on the outpost, Arlo was staring out at the empty stars. The Arcturian team was on its way, but deep down, he feared their arrival might only confirm his worst suspicions. The silence wasn't just the absence of sound, it was an active, palpable force. The more he focused on it, the more he felt it pressing into his mind, like a dense fog creeping through his thoughts. "Captain," Ruiz said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm picking up something, but it's faint, barely even registering on our sensors." Arlo snapped to attention. "Is it a signal?" "Not exactly." She adjusted the frequency, amplifying the faint interference. "It's almost like an echo, but there's no source. It's just there, lingering in the background." Arlo leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the readout. It was strange, almost like a shadow of a signal, barely even detectable against the usual cosmic noise. And yet, the more they listened, the more it felt like something was there. "Patch it through the speakers," Arlo ordered, his heart pounding. As the signal came through, an eerie sound filled the room. It was a low, pulsing hum, almost organic, like the heartbeat of some colossal creature. Every beat seemed to resonate with an ancient primal rhythm, sending shivers down their spines. What is that?" Ruiz whispered. Arlo didn't answer. He felt a strange sensation, a pressure building in his chest, a profound sense of wrongness that he couldn't shake. He glanced at the view screen, half expecting to see something lurking in the stars. But there was nothing. Nothing except the silence. "Captain, should we turn it off?" Ruiz's voice was trembling now, the fear unmistakable. But Arlo shook his head, transfixed by the pulsing hum. "No, we need to know. Whatever this is, it might be the only clue we have." They continued to listen, and as they did, the hum began to change, morphing subtly into something else. Voices, hundreds, thousands of voices, barely audible, like whispers carried on a dark wind. Ruiz clutched the console, her knuckles white. "Do you hear that? It's like they're calling to us." Arlo felt a cold sweat on his brow. The voices were haunting, filled with longing, despair and something else. A warning, perhaps, or a plea. And then, as quickly as it had started, the sound stopped, leaving only silence. For a long moment, neither of them moved. They were alone again, adrift in a void that felt infinitely more hostile than it had before. Whatever was happening on Earth, whatever had taken humanity's voice and left this dark, pulsing echo in its place, was far beyond their understanding. Arlo took a shaky breath. "We're going to have to go back." Ruiz stared at him, horror dawning on her face. "Captain, you heard what Earth Command said. They warned us not to return." Arlo's gaze was distant, his mind already racing through the possibilities, through the risks. "I know, but we can't ignore this. If we don't go back, if we don't find out what happened, then this silence will consume us too." As he spoke, a sense of finality settled over them. They both knew that once they set a course for Earth, there would be no turning back. And in the cold silence of the outpost, the darkness seemed to grow deeper, as though something ancient and hungry was waiting, listening, eager to meet them face to face. The decision to return to Earth hung heavy in the air, and Captain Chambers could see the fear in his crew's eyes. The message had been clear: do not return. Yet the silence was unbearable, a riddle they couldn't ignore. For better or worse, Earth was their home, and they were still human. "All hands, prepare for immediate departure," Arlo ordered, his voice steady even as his thoughts churned with doubt. "Set a course for the Sol system." Ruiz hesitated, her hand hovering over the controls. "Captain, are you sure? If whatever silenced Earth is still there, we could be walking into a trap." Arlo nodded, though inside he shared her concern. But there was no alternative. "We're already in the dark, Lieutenant. Better to face it head-on than to wait for it to come for us." The station's engines rumbled to life, and the crew hurried to their positions. As the outpost's lights flickered and dimmed in preparation for the jump, Arlo felt a strange, almost physical sensation, a prickling in the back of his mind, like fingers lightly brushing against his thoughts. He shook it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. "Jump drive charged," Ruiz announced, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "Destination locked." Arlo gave a curt nod. "Initiate." The stars outside the viewport stretched and twisted, the fabric of space-time bending as the station launched into faster-than-light travel. For a brief, disorienting moment, everything became a blur, an endless swirl of colors and shapes. Then, just as abruptly, the stars snapped back into focus, and there it was, the Sol system. But something was wrong. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. As the outpost re-emerged from the jump, the familiar sight of Earth and its surrounding celestial bodies should have greeted them. Instead, they were met with darkness, an all-consuming, suffocating blackness that seemed to swallow the light from the distant sun. The crew stared in shock as the view screen revealed a scene that defied explanation. Where is everything?" Ruiz's voice was barely more than a whisper. The station's sensors pinged frantically, trying to make sense of the data, but it was as though they had arrived in an endless void. No planets, no moon, not even the asteroid belt. Just darkness, stretching in every direction. Arlo's heart pounded. This can't be right. He turned to the navigation officer, a pale-skinned Martian named Kel. "Run a full scan, confirm our coordinates." Kel's fingers flew across the controls, her eyes wide with panic. "Coordinates confirmed, sir. We're where Earth should be, but there's nothing here. It's like the entire system is gone." Ruiz's breath came in short, panicked gasps. "How could an entire solar system just disappear?" Before Arlo could respond, a piercing alarm filled the command center. The station's lights flickered, and suddenly the view screen was filled with static. The hum they had heard before, the strange, pulsing heartbeat, returned, louder this time, thrumming through the station's metal hull. "Captain!" Kel shouted, her voice barely audible over the growing noise. "We're detecting something. It's surrounding us." Arlo's eyes snapped to the viewport. The darkness that enveloped them wasn't empty. It was moving. Like a living, sentient fog, it swirled and pulsed, as though something vast and incomprehensible was coiling itself around their fragile vessel. "Shields up!" Arlo barked, his instincts kicking in. "Divert all power to defenses!" But the station's systems were already failing. Panels sparked, lights dimmed, and the pulsing hum grew louder, resonating deep within their bones. The crew cried out as the darkness began to press against the station, the metal groaning under the pressure. "Captain, we're losing power!" Ruiz yelled, her hands frantically dancing across the console. "Whatever this thing is, it's draining our systems." Arlo gritted his teeth. They were defenseless, adrift in a sea of darkness that seemed to devour light, energy, and even hope. He needed answers, and fast. "Kel, broadcast an emergency signal," Arlo ordered. "We need help from anyone out there who can hear us." But as Kel tried to send the transmission, the comms array went dead. The station shuddered, and the darkness outside began to seep through the walls like an ethereal mist. The crew's screams filled the air as tendrils of blackness reached out, caressing their skin, probing, tasting. Arlo fought the rising tide of panic. He had to keep his people focused, had to keep them fighting, even if every instinct screamed at him to run. But there was nowhere to go. "Captain." Ruiz's voice was shaking, and she pointed toward the view screen. The static cleared for just a moment, revealing something beyond the darkness, a shape, vast and incomprehensible, like a tangle of limbs and eyes stretching across the void. The thing seemed to peer through the screen, directly into the heart of the station. And then, a voice, a chorus of whispers, each one laced with 1,000 lifetimes of sorrow and hunger, filled their minds. "You should not have returned." Arlo staggered back, clutching his head as the voice pierced his thoughts like needles. The presence was overwhelming, an ocean of ancient malice and incomprehensible intent. It wasn't just speaking to them. It was rifling through their memories, their fears, their very souls. "We need to get out of here!" Ruiz screamed, her voice breaking. "We have to jump again!" But the station's engines were offline, their power drained by the entity outside. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. And then, as quickly as it had come, the pressure lifted. The darkness receded, the tendrils withdrawing, and the pulsing hum faded into nothingness. For a moment, there was silence. The crew gasped, their breaths ragged, their bodies trembling. Arlo forced himself to his feet, his mind reeling. "Report? What just happened?" But before anyone could respond, a soft, rhythmic tapping echoed through the command center, a sound that sent chills racing down their spines. Arlo turned, his blood running cold. On the inside of the viewport, a message was scrawled in thick, dark lines, as though written by some unseen hand. "Leave, or we will make you vanish too." Ruiz's eyes were wide with terror, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Captain, it's not just Earth. It's the entire system. They erased it." Arlo stared at the message, his hands trembling. Whatever was out there, it wasn't just erasing transmissions, it was erasing reality itself. And they were next. The darkness around them pulsed once more, and the station's systems flickered weakly. Captain Chambers knew they had only moments before it returned in full force. "Lieutenant Ruiz," he said, forcing calm into his voice, "reroute any remaining power to the engines. We need one last jump." "But Captain," Ruiz started, panic in her eyes. "If we fail—" "We won't fail," Arlo interrupted, locking eyes with her. "It's this, or we end up like Earth." Ruiz swallowed hard, but nodded, her fingers dancing over the controls. The station shuddered as power drained from life support and non-essential systems into the engines. The eerie darkness outside pressed closer, tendrils starting to seep through the walls again. Kel screamed as a black tendril brushed her face, leaving her gasping on the floor, her eyes wide with terror. Arlo's heart pounded, but he couldn't afford to stop. "Engage the drive!" he shouted. Ruiz slammed her fist onto the console. The stars outside twisted as the station lurched into FTL, the darkness snapping away like a taut rope breaking. For a moment, the endless void was replaced with the dizzying swirl of faster-than-light travel. And then they emerged. This time the stars were clear, the silence normal. They were far from Earth, far from whatever malevolent force had consumed the system. The crew slumped in their seats, exhausted but alive. "Status report," Arlo said, his voice ragged. We're clear," Ruiz breathed, tears of relief in her eyes. "But Earth, it's gone, Captain, completely erased." Arlo stared out into space, the weight of the loss crashing into him. An entire civilization, countless lives, wiped away like they had never existed. But they were alive, for now. And somewhere in the darkness, that ancient, unknowable entity was waiting. "Send a message to the Arcturian Confederation," Arlo finally said. "Warn them, tell them, whatever took Earth, it's not done." As the station's comms crackled to life, Arlo looked back toward the distant stars. The silence wasn't just an end, it was a warning, and it was spreading.